Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. We've had another busy week of by-election action that we're going to get straight into. Look, of course we had the council by-elections as always, as you can see on the screen here. But this week all eyes were fixed on the constituency of Caerphilly down in the south of Wales for the Senedd by-election, and that's what we're going to go and have a look at first. Just before we do get into it, I want to say a massive thank you, because I mentioned in the last video, if we could get the subscriber count over 10,000 before the channel's birthday in early November, that would be fantastic. And you guys smashed through the 10,000 barrier within a few hours of that video going up. So thank you very much to all the new subscribers who have joined the channel. As you can see, we're up to 10,500 now. So thank you very much, everyone who has come and joined. Do get involved in the comments. As always, I like to hear everybody's thoughts. So let's get straight into these by-elections then. And we are going to start, like I say, by looking at Caerphilly in Wales. And here's the results. It was a bit of a shock in some regards. I mean, it was going to be Plaid or Reform. But look, a lot of people thought, or well, we're going to get into it in a minute and go through how it all kind of worked out. But certainly the betting markets thought it would be Reform. We looked, didn't we, at the Survation poll that came out earlier this week that had Reform on 42%, Plaid on 38%. So Reform have slightly underperformed that poll there. Look, the big story really should be Labour getting absolutely trounced. 35 points down in Caerphilly, losing a seat that they have held, not in the Senedd because it's not existed that long, but just in terms of the parliamentary Westminster constituency too. They've held Caerphilly for over a century. This has been a Labour voting heartland, very much a safe Labour seat, and they've been wiped out to 11% of the vote, which is extraordinary, but not surprising. We were expecting this, and that's the thing, you know, we were expecting to see this. And look, if this plays out next May across Wales, which it looks likely that it will, and if that then plays out across Wales in terms of parliamentary voting for Westminster, this is electoral oblivion for Labour, very much so. And when you combine that with what's probably going to happen in Scotland too, it's very, very bad news for them. So that really should be the headline story. But of course, in many ways, it's about Reform not winning. And so, look, Reform, look, they did very well. They've increased their vote share by 34 points, which is extraordinary in the opposite sense to how it's extraordinary for Labour dropping the same amount. But not enough. And Plaid themselves, we have to say, well done to them. Very, very good result. They've increased by 19 points from previously, from 2021, when the Senedd was last elected. And they've pipped Reform. And look, I think the big thing here, and look, this is why, we are going to get into it, but this is why I put alarm bells on the thumbnail, and why I said on X last night when I was following it along, I said alarm bells for Reform, not because they didn't win. You know, you're going to see a lot of reactionary people and people of the left in particular are going to be saying, oh, this is it, Reform have peaked. You know, they're on the way down. They bottled it, whatever. I don't think any of that is true. The alarm bells for me, I think, is that I think everybody thought this was going to be close. And actually it wasn't very close in the end. Plaid have won by an 11-point margin. But also I think Reform were pretty confident they were going to win this at 10 o'clock last night when the polls closed. And so they've been blindsided. They've been blindsided by either a surge in Plaid support that they hadn't seen, or tactical voting that they hadn't picked up. Now, I think tactical voting probably did play a large role in this. But look, I followed this all along last night. I did stay up for this result. On X, I was following it all along. You can follow it on X if you have an account, by the way. elect_watch UK. That's the account. If you want to come and follow over there, please do. A number of people did follow last night as we were going through this. If you've come over from in the opposite direction from X to YouTube and subscribed, welcome. Thank you for being here. So look, close of polls last night in Caerphilly at 10 o'clock. The betting markets were pretty confident that Reform would win, and they had been for a number of days and weeks leading up to this election. So Reform got up to almost 90% implied chance of winning here, about 85 points. But then things all started to change. About 11:45, so just around about 2 hours after the polls closed, all of a sudden Reform's chance started to drop, and it got down to less than 70% at around about 11:45. And in the opposite direction, Plaid very much increased in the opposite direction to over 30% of an implied chance of winning. So things were clearly afoot. And then things all started moving very, very quickly. So that was the previous one was about quarter to midnight. By just after midnight, about 5 minutes past or something like that, Reform's implied chance had collapsed down to 40%. So, down from above 80 at the polls closing to less than 40%. And Plaid's had raced up to over 60%. So clearly the two had switched. Plaid had become the favourites as the counting had begun. It was the news stories were coming out that Plaid were feeling very confident that they may have won. Reform were very, very quiet. And so the betting market started to swing very heavily towards Plaid. And then it wasn't much longer after that where they switched positions, Plaid up to 60. About quarter of an hour later, midnight, Plaid hit 90% implied chance on the betting market, and you can just see the sort of the steepness of that curve there as their fortunes changed over about a half-hour period, 45-minute period. For Plaid, they went up to 90% and never really looked back. At one point during the night, after this, their chance did sharply drop down. I didn't take a screenshot, but their chance did drop down to about 70%. Reform leapt up to 30 again, but then it all went back to 90-10, and that's how it stayed until just after 2 o'clock, 2:15. The result was declared that we just looked at the margins and the percentages and stuff. That was all declared at 2:15, and Plaid gained the seat from Labour officially. So that's how it all played out. So there was an element of surprise here. Reform were the favourites for a long time. And like I say, I think Reform were quite confident that they were going to win. And that's why I think there's a bit of alarm bells and given the margin of victory too for Plaid in the end, that it wasn't really all that close. So look, there's the result for Caerphilly, the by-election for the Senedd. Well done to Plaid. Very good result for them. Almost 50% of the vote. Like I say, I'm sure there's a bit of tactical voting that went on there. Labour wiped, and they're facing an existential crisis in May. And of course, this seat will be up for election again in May, won't it? So we'll see if Reform can get a better result in 6 months' time. Now, it's worth bearing in mind, I'm not going to go into detail in it now. This was obviously done under first past the post. In 6 months' time, it's going to be a fully proportional system, and I will go into detail about how that's going to work when we start doing preview videos for the Welsh Parliament. So do subscribe to the channel if you want to see those. They're going to start coming in the next few weeks as we get in towards 6 months of those May elections. We'll start doing preview videos for all of them across the country. So do come and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we will look into that electoral system and what that means. So that's the Senedd by-election result covered. Plaid win, Reform in second, Labour wiped out. All right, so we'll get into the council by-elections in England then, and we start in Birmingham. Now, we did cover this one briefly in the preview video for that was predominantly for the Welsh election, but we looked at this one too because I thought it would be interesting. Now, this is a 2 council award, so previously it was 1 Lib Dem, 1 Labour. The Liberal Democrats actually won the previous election. They had the largest vote share as a party, but Labour managed to get a councillor in there ahead of the second Lib Dem candidate, and that's the seat that Labour were defending here. But they've lost it to the Liberal Democrats. Turnout about 30%, which, as we said recently, is becoming kind of an average figure that we're seeing. The Liberal Democrats actually did decline in vote share, down 12 points. So they won this seat with only 34% of the vote. Labour down 15 points, so not a huge drop for them. I mean, it's bad, but it's not as bad as we like we saw in Wales. It's not disastrous for them. But really, the big winner from this election was an independent. She came in and got just under 20% of the vote. So I had a quick look who the things they did quite well, and they were the only person that really gained any great share of the vote. I had a look, and it's Carol Williams here for Moseley. And if you look down the list of things here, you can see racism and fascism, migrants, refugees, workers' rights, Palestine, LGBT+, and the climate crisis. So very much of the left, shall we say. And look, this is the problem for Labour, isn't it? This is the issue they're going to have. Obviously, we know Reform are eating their lunch in various parts of the country, but then they're getting attacked from the left wing as well. Independents like this, Gaza independents, even quite outwardly Islamist candidates and independents. The Green Party, your party, they've got a band of vultures on the left wing trying to eat their lunch too. And look, the Independent finished third here. They didn't actually beat Labour, but probably did enough to deprive them of enough of the vote for the Liberal Democrats to come in and win, even with a reduced vote share themselves. So look, again, I just mentioned about those preview videos. Birmingham City Council will be elected in its entirety in May next year. So this will be another one of those that we're going to be previewing in the coming weeks. So do come and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss those videos. So the Liberal Democrats gain off of Labour in Birmingham. Now in Colchester, it's a Labour defence and a Labour hold. Now you don't see that very often. Of course, the vote share did decline, and it declined pretty heavily, down 28 points. So in many ways, I think here they've been insulated by having almost 60% of the vote to start with. Having such a large leader sort of insulated them here. Liberal Democrats in second place, they increased their vote share by 12 points, which is fairly respectable. And Reform coming in straight at third place, having not stood here before, 22% of the vote. So turnout here down at 24%, so a little bit disappointing based on what we've seen recently. Just a 5% margin of victory for the Labour Party. So they clung on here somewhat with a very, very steep decline in their vote share. But they'll take the win. You know, this is about the best that Labour can hope for at the moment. If you remember Colchester, it is a Liberal Democrat Labour run council coalition. The Conservatives actually have the greatest number of seats on the council. The Conservatives declined 9 points here. They weren't really in the race to start with. So I think it's another one where, look, a fairly low, well, very low share of the vote to win, 29.7%. And first, second, and third all within about 7 points of each other. So, this is the case across various parts of the country, many parts of the country. Reform have, according to the Nowcast, we see it in some by-elections. We're going to see one a bit later on. Reform have established themselves in some parts of the country as the front runner. The Liberal Democrats have established themselves as the front runner. Of course, they've been going for much longer. But they've established themselves as the front runners in certain parts of the country. But there are still many parts, many areas where it's very, very split. 2-horse races, 3-horse races, some even 4 or 5-horse races. Those 4 or 5 ones are rare, but they are there. If you look on the Nowcast, you see them. And I think this goes to show, winning an election here with less than 30% of the votes, quite extraordinary. And first and third only separated by 7 points. So very, very split electorate, and just waiting for one party to kind of take the bull by the horns and establish dominance. And that's not quite happened there. But Labour hold on. Like I said, it's about the best they can hope for at the moment. So a good result for Labour in some ways, but obviously still losing a huge swathe of their votes. Good news for the Conservatives too. Defending in Whittlesey North West for Fenland Council. The Conservatives hold on. Similarly, they declined in vote share too, but only down 10 points. Now, I did mention in the preview, or as we had a brief preview of this election, no Liberal Democrat standing here and no Green who stood here previously. I think that helps the Conservatives. Now, you might say, no Green, how does that help the Conservatives? Well, don't underestimate how many people, I think, or how many voters switch from the Conservatives to Green in fairly affluent middle-class areas. It's happened in Suffolk. It's not... I know they should be diametrically opposed, but herein I think lies the issue the Conservatives kind of are facing. They have a very, very split voter base. Some might go to Reform, some might go to Lib Dems, and I think some may even go to the Greens. So look, no Green Party, no Liberal Democrats, I think helped the Conservatives here. They only lost 10 points. Reform, with a very, very good 34-point gain, having not stood here before, they finish clearly in second place ahead of the other two, but a fairly comfortable margin of victory for the Conservatives, 13 points. And again, 27% turnout. It's more like what we are used to seeing, a bit higher perhaps, but below that 30 mark that we've become used to seeing in recent weeks. So a Conservative hold in Fenland. So the two main parties do get a win this week. Now here's one that Reform will be very happy with. Paulsgrove Ward in Portsmouth. So a local party defending here. And Reform gain, and as you can see, gain very, very convincingly. So similar to Redcar and Cleveland, we saw a few weeks ago, Reform getting over 60%, comfortably over 60% of the vote. Again, turnout just under 30%. So not as good as we've seen recently. But look, you can see with a 53-point margin of victory, Reform here, the clear winners. And they pretty much directly transplanted the local party vote to themselves. I do believe that this local party are quite Reform aligned. I think a number of the councillors have actually defected to Reform, so perhaps not a surprise, but they still had to go and do it at the ballot box on their own ticket, and they managed to do that very, very comfortably. And the reason I say I think they've pretty much just transplanted that vote, you can see the Conservatives are down 4, the Lib Dems up 6, Labour down 4, Greens up 2. So the other parties didn't really move all that much. I think this was pretty much just a direct vote change from the localist party into Reform. So look, a good win, a big win for Reform, and one I think they No, it's a bit far to say they needed that, but one they can have for this week, considering they lost out in Caerphilly. So for the final ones of this week, then we move down into the southwest. Two in Somerset. I know we said in the preview video, I expect the Liberal Democrats to win down here. It's very much Liberal Democrat country these days. The first one, Dunster Ward, Conservatives were defending. Liberal Democrats gain off of them. They increased their vote share by 8 points to almost 50% of the votes. And look, isn't this the story we're becoming very used to seeing? Conservatives defending. Conservatives get 19.5% of the vote, down 23 points, and it's only good enough for third. So again, in a ward that the Conservatives are defending, they can't even finish second. Reform finished second. Again, having not stood here before, they go straight into 29 points. A clear win for the Liberal Democrats in Liberal Democrat country, 21-point margin. Again, turnout here, 32%, so over that 30% marker in Dunster. As for Glastonbury, this was a Liberal Democrat hold, but they did actually decline in vote share here. I mean, not really. Less than 1%, so it's pretty much evens. I expected them to increase their vote share. I thought they might get up into the 40s, but just no change really for the Liberal Democrats here. So 36.4%, a fairly low percentage of the vote to win with here in Glastonbury. Like I say, I thought they might improve on that somewhat. But the same story again in terms of the Conservatives. Although they weren't defending here, they're relegated into third place by Reform, who get 21.6% of the vote. Only just. Conservatives got 21% of the vote themselves, declining by 10 points. So not the worst showing here for the Conservatives, but they are relegated to third place. And the Greens declined by 7.5 points. So I'm not sure what was going on there for the Green Party either. But look, again, a clear win for the Liberal Democrats, 15 points. And again, a decent turnout of 33.5%. So Milton and Tameside Ward in Torridge, down in Devon. It's an independent defence. Liberal Democrats gained. Now, look, Devon, a bit different to Somerset. Certainly not Liberal Democrat country, although they did do very well in Devon County Council elections in May. But Reform are much more competitive in Devon as a county than they are in Somerset, and I think this result goes to show that. So the Lib Dems gained, but they came in, having not stood here before, with a very impressive 37.5%. Let's take nothing away from them there. But Reform came in, also having not stood here before, got 31.1% of the vote. So only a 6-point margin of victory for the Liberal Democrats. Now, of course, they'll take that. But it is much more competitive in Devon between the Liberal Democrats and Reform. The Lib Dems might be happy with this. Look, Torridge and Tavistock parliamentary constituency is projected to go to Reform. I don't know if that's enough to make them the favourites in this ward. Like I say, the nowcast does not directly translate to how you'd expect every ward in the council to vote. But I think it goes to show the point that Devon is Lib Dem versus Reform, which again is bad news for the Conservatives, who didn't stand here last time either. They came in at 16% of the votes, but they're in third place. And like I say, it's and not particularly close to first and second. So Devon is Reform versus the Liberal Democrats, and the Conservatives don't have a space in that race, unfortunately. So more bad news for the Conservatives. Liberal Democrats gain. They've had a good couple of weeks, the Lib Dems. They did very, very well last week, and this week they've made another number of gains. So look, clearly the two main parties who are benefiting from sort of Labour in crisis in government, and the Conservatives, whatever their problem is clearly Lib Dems and Reform. We'll see in future weeks if the Greens can get on that bandwagon as well, but certainly those two parties at the moment are the big beneficiaries. All right, so looking ahead to next week, and there's another 6 by-elections to look forward to across England councils again. Hendon in Barnet, Conservative defence, so North London. Interestingly, Hendon as a parliamentary constituency is one of the few that the Conservatives are still projected to hang on to. So we'll see if they can defend their council seat there up there in Barnet. Roebuck in Stevenage, Labour defending there. Labour have a huge majority on the Stevenage council. But I think they'll probably come under pressure from either the Liberal Democrats or Reform, depending on how that ward sort of goes. Stirling East up in Stirling, again, a Conservative defence. Look, again, as I always say, I have very, very limited knowledge and sort of input on Scottish affairs at the local level, but I imagine the SNP do quite well in Stirling, maybe, but perhaps if it's a Conservative voting area, perhaps not. Garlinge in Thanet. Now, this will be interesting, of course. Thanet is where Nigel Farage stood once before to become an MP when he was in the UKIP days, with the localist stepping down, Reform obviously standing there. This may be one that Reform look to win fairly convincingly. Tunbridge Wells is a Liberal Democrat defence, St John's Ward. I'd be very, very surprised if the Liberal Democrats don't hold on there. And lastly, Bromsgrove South, Worcestershire. So, again, this is a Reform resignation or something else that's happened since the May elections this year. As you can see, it was very, very close in May. Reform got 34.8, which was enough to win. Lib Dems got 31.6. So I think there's a chance when it's quite close there is a chance Reform might lose that because they lost when they had to defend these seats that they got in May earlier this year. When they've had to defend them and it's been a close sort of marginal victory, they did lose the second time round. So we'll see. That might be a Reform loss there. So shaping up to be potentially another good night for the Liberal Democrats next week. Please make sure you've hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss next week's Roundup. Please do hit like on the video as well if you can. It does help, as does, of course, getting into the comments and let me know your thoughts about everything we've covered today. I do like reading your comments and seeing you all getting involved down there. So thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.